So I guess you guys need to sort of jump in when it doesn't make sense. And if it gets too much, then we'll like delay it. But try and follow as quickly as much as possible. So I guess the first question to ask ourselves is why? Why do we have to change the financial model? Previously, if I come here, previously what used to happen, and these, even your LCPs don't know this, because I didn't tell them yesterday. So previously what used to happen was like on ICX realization, you would get £900, and on OGX realization, you would get £75. Plus, you would have to pay an affiliation fee, which was, which was variable depending on the LC. It varied between about £500 to £2,000. So within that bracket. So what would happen is the same way it happens right now, in the sense that like EPs pay money straight to the MC, and companies are invoiced by the national team. So the money always goes to the MC, and then these costs would be like these revenues would be like sent back down to the LCs. Cool. So financing people, why do you think this does not work? Come on, guys, come on. Loan management.
There's no incentive for the LC to do better.
Ha! Thank you. That's the main point. The main point is yes, like whether you do 10 ICX or 1 ICX or 1 OGX, and even if you actually do nothing, there's no incentive to grow. As you saw this year, LC massively do have the capacity to grow if you kind of give them a little bit of an incentive and a kick up the ass. So this was kind of the previous situation. The why that was the previous. So the why we had to change it was like no incentive to grow. What was ICEX UK surplus or loss last year? Huh? Thank you. So ICEX UK made a loss last year. Also, like this, you would know there was no cash flow for LCs. So because you would only get them on realization, that means that basically all the money that was generated by the previous term. Because basically realization is generally come through June, July, August. Which means unless you do a raise and realization within your term, you basically have to survive off the finances from the previous year. And you basically, all your work you're doing is actually for the future year. So there's no cash flow for LCs. No cash flow, no LC to grow. There was also a very big disproportion between like what you got for an ICX and what you got for OGX. So you would actually get a lot more for raising and realizing an ICX, but actually the proportion for OGX is quite small, only £75. So there was like quite a lot of, let's just say, irregular, this imbalance. So these were like kind of the why as to why it actually had to change. So then what happened was that actually the finance subcommittee. So what happened was the finance subcommittee at NSC last year were kind of faced with the task to actually come up with a new financial model that would A, incentivize growth, B, make it like a bigger proportion, also remove these fees, because there was like a confusion, there's loads of fees going one way, going back the other way. So what the finance subcommittee came up with was basically, they came up with this beautiful formula, which is if we take a certain split of the total MC budget, so if we take a certain percentage of that, that's what we should pay. So whatever we want, it's 10%, it's 15%, doesn't matter. So if we take a certain percentage of that, what we then need to do is we basically need to allocate it. We need to allocate it by LC. So we need to decide which LC is paying what. So if we're to sum the allocation, which we'll call the allocation of contribution, which we'll call contribution I, over NI, which is the number of LCs, then that should equal to that. Makes sense? Fancy people. This is easy. And then the next problem we have is like, how do we split it quarterly? So basically, we need to make sure that if we were call this A, we need to make sure that Q1 plus Q2 plus Q3 plus Q4. So if these are all percentages, we need to make sure that this basically adds up to 100%, right? Make sure you split it over 4 quarters. Pretty basic. So this was the beautiful formula that we sort of had to kind of solve. Previous years, so I'll put it up here to give you that, we used to contribute about 40% of MC budget. That's just the way it worked out. There was no agreement to contribute that amount. That's just at the end of the year when you looked at what the exchanges would realized, when you paid this back to the LCs, it pretty much worked out that LCs contribute about 40%. But if the LCs decided unanimously not to do exchange one year, then basically the MC just would not just have a 40% shortfall. So although that was it was, there was no guarantee that that would be supplied. So the next decision to make was like the split. So the S, this number here. So this was very, very heated discussions, if I'm honest. So it was, if you want to imagine it like a balance, what should be the fair split between like MC and LC? So what I want you to think is, why would you want the MC to contribute more and LC to contribute less? So why would you want this situation? What would be the advantage of this situation? Because we'd keep it, is your argument. Yeah.
Because all the money from the MC would just go into paying like other fees and stuff. But
So this means that the MC basically is contributing more than the LC. Yeah. So different, I don't know, like advantages I don't know. There are some models where it's the case. Like Belgium, basically MC has to contribute 100% of its MC costs. Czech Republic, its MC has to contribute 90% of its MC costs. Germany is closer to like the 40-60% model. But then we sort of thought, like, what happens if it goes the other way? If it goes the other way, you could see LCs could see disadvantages in that they are actually contributing arguably solely for the purpose of maintaining the MC. One of the things you do have to be careful of is, like, as an entity which is there to coordinate other entities, is the sole purpose of the people you manage shouldn't be just to contribute towards your expenses. Like, if as an executive board you run up so many expenses that all your members do is raise exchange to finance you as an executive board, I would argue that as an executive board you're not really doing the right thing. So there is a reason why this was not sustainable, is the fact that, as you know, they made a loss. And actually, business development revenues, so this is revenues that from the white tech, so from sponsorship, from careers fairs, has actually gone like down in previous years. So it used to be like £250,000 from careers fairs, and this year we're projected to.
Sorry, from business development. Well, that's including NSC.
Yeah.
Like national aesthetics plus national sponsorship, with about 140.
So they used to be able to bring in about £250,000 for careers fairs, and now it's about half. So this is why this model. Yeah. So this is why this model is not sustainable anymore. So fair enough. Yeah, you could say tough shit, and see go and find more money. That's that. You could say that. So that's not what the financial subcommittee decided. They decided that basically, because there is disadvantages to either of these, how about we just compromise and just go 50-50? So Dan Bell was quite cheeky at this stage. He said, but if you want to hold us accountable, then you should contribute more. Makes sense, right? So if we're contributing more, then therefore we want to know our return on the investment. We want to make sure that you do what we want you guys to do. Cool. So the financial target committee was equally cheeky and just decided to go 51%. So just 1% more, but technically that means we contributed more, right?
And it also means that you're the key shareholder in that decisions.
So this is how we came up with our S, which is our split. Cool? So this is that number. So that's how we came up with the split. The second bit is allocation by LC, which is here. So there are different models that we sort of thought about. The first one is basically take total MC budget, yeah, and just divide it by number of LCs, right? Nice and easy. Nice and easy. That'd be really, really simple, right? Why do you think we didn't do that?
Because some LCs are doing way better than the others.
Correct.
It wouldn't really be fair, would it?
Is it fair that like a London LC who's got much more opportunities should pay as much as a smaller LC?
Well, it's not even a question of fairness, it's a question of capability. If you can do that, you've got half or maybe even more of the LCs in complete accuracy. So,
Sure. And then you've got the argument that even if you want to look at that perspective, you could think that the London market is actually divided in three. So like, is it actually their market? Is it? So we decided that was not sustainable. So I was like, nope. Okay. So that would have been easy. Nope. So if you thought this discussion was long, this was even longer. So that was disregarded. The second one was like, basically, we would base it on T minus 1. What does T minus 1 mean? So we thought we could basically base it on the previous year's revenues. Yeah? So you look at last year, what did they make? So it's a bit like a tax system, to be honest. Look at what they made last year, and then we'll project that they'll make the same this year, and we'll tax them this way. However, the reason why that's not really sustainable is that if you look at LCs, this is how they go year on year. Say that up? No, that's not going to work, because that means that basically when they're in the bust, we're going to tax them more, and when they go in the boom, we're actually going to tax them less. So that's not going to work. Cool. So then I'm gonna make it. So the only thing basically LSPs could agree on was like the green, blue, purple, orange cluster model. So what we did have is we had ICX targets, we had OGX targets. So what we did was we basically decided that this would be the only fair way of allocating this amount of money. So what we did is we created a number here which we call Y, which is basically a combination of ICX and OGX, which just gives us one number. How we came out with that was pretty simple, is we basically decided that Y was going to be equal to OGX plus 3.43 of ICX. How do you think we came up with 3.43? Smart guy. Yeah, so if you divide the average TN fee, 1,200, by the EP fee of 350, that becomes 3.43. So therefore, arguably, 1Y is 1 EP, and 3.43Y is 1 TN. The joke on the Y is that we couldn't use X, because X symbolizes exchange, which would be confusing. And we talk about the Y all the time, so if you remember, if you were here at, when was it, Axis, the LSPs were like talking about the Y. That was a joke. A bit late now. So this was what they agreed upon. We agreed that we would take the ICX and OGX cluster targets, we would create the Y by this mathematical formula, and we would allocate it that way. If you allocate it that way, what we actually created is this. Is if you look at, if you have a Y here, and if you have money here, what basically we created, if we follow an axis through here, you had basically you have the cluster, the contribution of the green cluster, contribution of the blue cluster, contribution of the purple cluster, contribution of the orange cluster, and this would basically give you your Y mins. So if you were to achieve this number of Y, you would actually contribute the sufficient amount of money to actually cover this number here. because you're mathematical people, you can, because we actually created here, we created YO, YP, YB, YG. Because you're very quick people, you all know that basically YG is going to be some number, right? Some number for X from, no, it's the other way around. So if we put YP, it's basically X from orange to purple of Y orange, right? If I give you YP and if I give you YO, you can find X. Yeah? Yeah, simple, one equation. So basically from this way, you can actually find these X's to move from here to here, back to here, right? And basically, what does that mean? That means that we only have one unknown quantity in this equation. One unknown quantity, one equation, we have a solution. So all it does is you use Excel solver, which gives you this number here. Apply this formula, and it will give you that number. Apply this formula, it gives you that number, gives you that number. That is how we came up with the yearly contribution targets by cluster for the coming year. The final thing you need to know is that basically the final thing to do is to allocate it by quarter. So the quarterly allocation, we looked at the year. So the quarters are weird, so your Q4 is basically end of July. So end of July. And your Q1 is end of July. August, September, October, end of October. So all we did is we looked at the conferences. So we looked, here's Access, here's LDS. When do LCs need cash flow? When will they have cash flow? And that's when we came up with 5, 15, 30, and 50%. Why? Because if you think about it, most of your revenues come during realization period, which is in Q4. We still wanted a symbolic amount to go out in Q1, so we put 5%. Just for it to make sure that every LCP understood that this is going to happen, it's going to start. But that's how we came up with 5, 15, 30. I think this will very probably converge closer towards like a 25, 25, 25 allocation. So this is basically, that's how we came up with S. That's how we came up with the contribution amount. And this is how we came up with the quarterly allocations.
And it's all obviously allocated depending on your cluster. So, yeah, if you exceed your targets by a lot, you get a lot of money.
The idea being is that, yes, if you exceed your targets, then you get to keep that surplus. This makes LCs much more responsible for their investments as well.
And a lot of LCs are actually looking to make a lot of money. Surprisingly enough.
So then the final thing that you have to understand, especially as VP Finances, is when do you actually get that money? So we actually decided that OGX, you would get 75% of the fee on raise. This was to actually create LC cash flow. Because until recently, like if you wanted to go to LDS and subsidize LDS, then basically you had to rely on your previous successor to actually create the revenues for it. Here, if you raise EPs during your first term, then you can create cash flow that goes to LDS. And 25% on realization. This is trying to ensure that they get matched. ICX, nothing gets on raised or on matched, it all comes in on realization. So this is like on your quarterly statements, this is what is being used. For it to be raised, it has to be on myset.net. So lots of LCs, not lots, but some LCs are currently in negative balance at the end of Q3, even though they have the right Y, simply because it's not available on myset.net, which means that the money is not credited to your account. So this is the current ICE UK financial model. So just as an FYI, this will have to be changed next year, because obviously we don't know what targets will be given to LCs. And LCPs might choose to go for a same fee for everyone model, or a different model. But this will definitely be changing. However, the philosophy, as in they have to choose an S, they have to choose the contribution and choose the quarterly targets, will remain the same. And the logic behind them, you're more than welcome to ask them, but this is the logic behind the financial model.
Any questions?
How much is the affiliation these days?
Is it really weird that I know them off by heart?
Yeah.
Oh, but not by each cluster, just
Yeah.
like...
Orange cluster is £5,000, purple cluster is £12,000, Blue cluster is £23,000, and green cluster is like £26,000.
And I said UK as a whole? Or
I said UK, the total MC budget as a whole is about £500,000. So 51% is close to £250,000, so to give you an idea, the median, so if we were to use this model, we would actually have worked out about £15,000 per LC. So as you can see, it's a Robin Hood model at the moment, where like blue and green clusters cross-subsidize slightly, slightly.
You see, I'm Sheffield paying a lot. Yeah, that's.
Cool.
So when you do well, you put up with us next year?
So the LCD will come up with a clustering strategy.
You might have shifts.
And there might be shifts, there might change, it might not even be a cluster strategy. This was like a 1 year allocation model, because basically no one else could, the LSPs couldn't agree on anything else. So it's a compromise. Cool. So those who want to run off for break, please do.